Hi, everybody. My name is Jesse Chang. I'm the executive director of Catalyst in Gabriel Valley, which is a nonprofit working in the county of LA, just east of the city of LA. And our primary mission is partnering with local school districts, helping underserved uh, schools, families, and students. Our context is predominantly Asian, Latino families, many of them who are also recent immigrants. And our goal is always to not only see these families and communities and schools not survive, but also thrive. And so school gardens has been one of the things that we've been doing over the years. And it's really a literal manifestation of the kind of thriving we want to see in our community. And I'm rather new to the whole nature RX piece. And I think part of that is because you don't talk about, at least when I was doing these gardens, I don't sell the gardens as a place for mental health, mental health and well-being, because in order to kind of get the stakeholders and administration on board, we have to talk about being an outdoor classroom. This is going to enhance the education, the science, maybe the writing. So we don't really talk about mental health as a way of creating these spaces. However, I did start becoming a lecturer for a food and environmental justice class at Cal State University, Los Angeles. And so it's been interesting where I can actually assign Nature RX as part of the curriculum. And I've had students, respond positively to that as well. But at the K through 12 level, that's not something I can necessarily dictate as a nonprofit partnering with local schools. But to just kind of, next slide, just to give some context as to sort of the motivation, this is a Google Map picture from 2019 of my childhood home in Massachusetts. And it looks pretty much the same. They still kept the sugar maples in the front. This is triggering me because I remember I had to like rake all those leaves up every fall. But if you look in the back, there's also very much, there still is remaining woods in the back. And there was even more when I was growing up because they didn't have as many of the sort of these suburban houses kind of, eating away at all the forest. And I remember have very rich memories every year looking for wild blueberries in the patch of grass where, the grass wasn't able to grow. Searching for salamanders underneath logs, every spring looking for the vernal stream or wetland that would appear with the snow melt or with the rains, and seeing the emergence of skunk cabbage and looking for pink lady slipper orchids every spring, creating a little fort out of logs. And so all of these things were I never realized like the gift of that amount of exposure to nature, and I wasn't supervised either. Now, that was the other thing. But that kind of rich experience, I think you can go to the next slide, is what I feel, especially here in urban Los Angeles, is what I would want to pass on to my kids who are growing up here in LA. And what I would like to see, especially our underserved schools, to be exposed to as well. I'm going to give you a second just to read this quote from David Sobel, who's a place-based educator and teacher about place-based environmental education. Give you 5 seconds to read that. And the context of this quote is, and my daughter has confirmed this, that environmental education when she was in elementary school basically was teaching them about global warming and all the terrible things that are happening to our planet. And David Sobel is saying, like, when we start with that, that can actually create a subtle form of dissociation for children, especially if they haven't had a lot of positive experiences with nature. Then what they're learning about nature is that it's all going, badly, and therefore it's also overwhelming, and therefore it's sort of like, well, we need to kind of leave it behind. and there's nothing I can do about it. And so I really like how David Sobel says, no, the first step we want to do is to create a sense of love. You know, can we talk about love? Learning to love it and feel comfortable in nature. And I think that's kind of my primary motivation, is to create these spaces on these campuses where a lot of students don't get that kind of exposure. I remember one of the superintendents, when we were talking about one of the projects, saying, yeah, I want my kids, you know, I want our students to have that same kind of access to the kinds of green space that you often have to pay for or have memberships to get into, like the arboretum, the local arboretums, or other gardens in LA. And so I think that's one of those things. Yeah, we want to create access with these gardens, but more importantly, not just create the access, but also create a sense of bonding and create a sense of connection to nature for students who are not necessarily exposed to a lot of it, especially in our context in LA. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about two of the gardens. One of them is a high school edible native garden here in, those are two of my interns. And you can go to the next slide. And the other one's middle school, nature garden. This one's primarily natives. And then next slide. And as I was reflecting on this talk, I was like, well, what made some of this unplanned nature RX that teachers implemented? You know, what made that successful? And part of it was the geography of where we placed these gardens. And as you can see from these kind of Google Maps, the red is where the gardens are located in terms of where the campus are. And you can see that they're in central locations. They're not marginalized, like put off to, you know, I remember walking through some sites and they really want, you know, the principal or they want to put it way in the back, like in the back corner, you know, out of sight, out of mind. But I think that kind of would end up not being utilized because people aren't going to see it. And only those who have that kind of special knowledge or have, like, you know, particular passion for it will maintain it. And so these central locations on campus gave that sort of access. And you can see the blue lines are where the students and school community, parents, they would all be walking through those different areas. The one on the right-hand side in particular, the nature garden, there were 4 or 5 doors that actually open up on each side of each of those 2 wings. And so those doors actually open out into the garden and students and teachers can actually walk through there. And so, and then the T is where the sort of my champion teachers who really cared for the garden and integrated the garden into their classroom. You can see where they're also centrally located. And so they have immediate access to the garden. Okay, next slide. And so here's a quote from the high school teacher, English teacher. I'll just give you a second to read what she had to say. And it was funny because, again, this was unplanned. This is just ways that she started incorporating the garden into her classrooms. And she said for herself that personally, I'd always go outside to decompress, get away from technology. She had a lot of computers set up in her classroom that, you know, was adjoining to the garden. Get away from technology and sit in the garden to feel better. It was also a reminder for me to get out more. Now she's no longer at that school, no longer having access to that garden, and she notices that she's a lot more stressed at her new location. Okay, next slide. This was the junior high science teacher. I'll give you a second to read what he had to say. And I've been in and walked in like during his classes, and I can attest that classroom environment can be very stressful for, you know, at times, you know, classroom full of junior high kids. But but yet, he was able to utilize the garden for students to be able to de-stress. He noticed they were happier when they were working outside. And yeah, so that's one of those. So even though this was unplanned, I was really happy to hear about how nature and these gardens were being utilized to address things like mental health and help students. And I'm hoping that when I started the lecturing for the food environmental justice class, I started online. It was completely online because we were still coming out of the pandemic. But I think now, maybe that's part of the silver lining. I'm hoping that Nature RX will continue to not just happen in these gardens, but as I'm building more gardens, and I'm looking to do the same at Cal State LA, that in our post-pandemic world, that Nature RX is just going to become another way of intentionally selling more school gardens in our underserved communities and LA's urban concrete sprawl. So thank you for your time.
That was so lovely. I mean, wow. I'm just so excited about all of these presentations. Thank you so much, Jesse. That was wonderful.